Okay, here we go again. And for the time being, I'm still doing this weekly instead of every other week. So, as a special treat for all my thousands and thousands of listeners out there, here we go. You are listening to KPCA LP, Petaluma, California, at 103.3 FM and worldwide at www.kpca.fm. And this is the Midnight Skeptic. The views of the Midnight Skeptic are not, repeat, not necessarily the views of KPCA or any of its affiliates. Okay, this is show number 39 of this new regime where I'm doing it on YouTube as well as the KPCA LP 103.3 station for Petaluma Community Access. Okay, this is going to be broadcast on the radio station this coming Sunday, the 17th at its usual time, 9 o'clock in the evening, and www.kpca.fm for those outside of the 103.3 FM radio area. Okay, the views of the Midnight Skeptic, as I've said many times before, damn well should be the views of Petaluma Community Access and its television stations, and then especially this station, KPCA LP 103.3 FM. And today is Wednesday, the 13th, and the Giants lost last night to the Dodgers, 7-2. But they're going to be playing game number 5 up here tomorrow night. That's why I'm doing this now. And I don't want to say getting it out of the way, but yeah, I'm doing it today on Wednesday. Okay. And please, if you want to say anything at all about the show, suggestions, helpful hints as to how I can make it better, or hate mail on some of the opinions that I expressed on this show, email me at themidnightskeptic@gmail.com. That's all one word, all lowercase letters. I'll get it, and then I'll decide for myself what I want to do about these suggestions or wallow in the hate mail. And okay, real quick shout outs. The East Coast, Geraldine Goldfinger out on Long Island, Dr. Dave Rubin in the Raleigh-Durham area, Nelson and Alice Lydell in Sarasota, Florida, Amelia Beamer in Edgewater, Florida. That's up in the St. Augustine area. She's ex-Petaluman, and she moved there 3 months ago maybe. Okay, the Sonora group, Bob and Sandy Fisher, Brad and Martha Fisher. Martha, please wear your PPE. She's a CNA nurse up at an elder care facility up there. Judy May, Leonidas Maciel, Darrell Larson, and now down in Mexico City, Rosie Lopez Negrete. She listens in every now and then. Okay, locally, Stan and Kathy Gustafson down in Pacifica. Rich and Kathy in Sebastopol. Very occasionally they listen in. Tim Conrad here in Petaluma. He was in my class up in Sonora, along with the Sonora gang that I mentioned up there. Tom and Nancy Throw down here in Petaluma. Nariman. I want to if you're listening, Nariman, I want to get together with you for another glass of that really good wine at the wine bar down in the theater district here in Petaluma. Okay, up in Sacramento, Dave and Rosie Takacs. That is a Hungarian name. I know him through my late wife's family. Mickey Huff, the godfather of Project Censored. Geez. And he's up in Sacramento, but he commutes to teach history and communications down at Diablo Valley College. His show was earlier today here at 1 o'clock on KPCA LP 103.3 FM, and it's repeated again on Friday at 1 o'clock over in Berkeley, KPFA 94.1. Okay, down in Arizona, my brother Brandon and his wife Mina and Andrea, his daughter, my niece. She's a nurse also, right outside of Phoenix in Santan Valley. I'm not sure the hospital she works at, but again, Andrea, please take care of yourself. And then her husband, Tim, and the three little terrorists, one of which is just getting into pee-wee football, or I guess that's what they call it, but they're getting up there now. Okay. Where does the time go when you're having fun? Okay, and then down in Patagonia, Arizona, Karina Hilliard, who is studying, I guess, biology, Arizona State. I don't think they have a separate course in herpetology, but if they did, well, she could probably teach it because she's a snake removal technician, officer 309 of the Animal Control Department down in Patagonia. Okay, enough of that. Okay, I got a announce. Well, on my Facebook page, when I announced these shows coming up, I said that there would be a lot of good news on this show. I hate being a negative Nelly all the time, and I hate being depressed about the direction that this world, and specifically our country, is going. But I try to look on the bright side of life. Okay, I got to announce the passing of a guy over in Sweden, Lars Vilks, Vilks. If you guys don't know who he is, he's rather obscure, but he was a cartoonist and an artist whose depiction in cartoon form of the Prophet Muhammad got fundamentalists, Islamists up in arms, literally up in arms, and they came after him to the extent that they were published in a Danish newspaper, but he's Swedish, and he lives in Sweden, and he had to be protected by the Swedish government. He had a pair of bodyguards going around with him wherever he went. Okay. And let's see. Remember Charlie Hebdo, which is a satirical magazine in Paris, France. They were attacked by some Islamic fundamentalists who didn't like the way they depicted the Prophet Muhammad. Oh, God, I can't remember how many years ago. I'm riffing now. Okay. Islamicists attempted the assassination of Mr. Vilks. The vehicle he and his two Swedish bodyguards were traveling in, he was on his way home, they veered into oncoming traffic and had a head-on collision with a truck. And all three died. The truck driver himself was taken to a hospital. He's in relatively bad shape, but I guess his truck was a large one, and he was more protected than Mr. Vilks and his bodyguards were. Okay. Vilks was a free speech advocate, of course. I mean, all thinking people are free speech advocates, which is diametrically opposed to blasphemy laws, which are prevalent in hardline Islamic countries, Pakistan and now Afghanistan come to mind. Now, I am not anti-Islam. I'm anti-religion in general. Specifically, I'm against militant religions of any kind, be they Islam, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, and militant Christians. Now, I guess the militant Christians that we have in this country, more specifically the Southern Baptists, they're not weapon-wielding people, thank goodness, but in their attitudes about life and how religion should rule our lives, they're every bit as militant as the Islamists. The Jewish militants, there are a lot of them, and they are very themselves anti-Islamist, and in fact anti-Western people that wander into their Orthodox neighborhoods. They'll throw rocks at you if you're wearing shorts, or if, especially females, if they're, how dare they wear short skirts? It doesn't matter if they're from Israel or not. If they're tourists, they'll at the very least be spat upon by the Orthodox Jewish people. Hindu, the premier of India now is a Hindu nationalist, and those are fairly frightening people, and they're passing laws that essentially outlaws Islamic people. Buddhist militants, I just have to remind you that the nation of Sri Lanka had a civil war not that many years ago. I can't remember exactly how many years ago, but the Buddhists were, including the monks, were weapon-wielding, Hindu shooting militants. Okay. Okay, and I've said on many shows before that religion in general has been detrimental for humanity, especially when it comes to women. I don't know of any religion that is anything other than run by men. I just don't know of any. I on shows a while back, I said that I was going to investigate the Wiccan religion, because out of all the ones that I've heard about, read about, and so on, it may be that the Wiccan religion has some female up in the upper hierarchy, and I don't even know that it is a hierarchy, but the Wiccan religion seems to be more female friendly than any other religion. Okay, more good news. Mr. Vilks's passing is not good news, but the causes that he espoused and was persecuted for, we should end that. Okay. Freedom of the press, freedom of artistic. As a matter of fact, wait a second here. Okay. The radio people cannot see this, but the YouTube people can. Right now, I'm holding in my hand a pencil and part of a piece of paper that I'm going to draw on. I am going to draw a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad. I'm drawing it right now as I speak. I'm not an artist. I'm not a good cartoonist either, but the basics are here. He's got a head and he's got a turban on his head and a beard. Nobody really knows whether the actual Prophet Muhammad had a beard or not. Maybe not. The Taliban over in Afghanistan, who just took over the country, all insist that their adherents grow beards. And they are very conservative militants, so I assume that somehow in their minds they need to grow beards in order to be as much like the Prophet Muhammad as possible. Okay, now I've drawn my cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad, Prophet. I'm going to draw an arrow to him so you know what I'm attempting to draw here. Okay, the radio people won't be able to see this, but I'm going to hold this up, and I drew a smile on his face too. I guess occasionally even the Prophet Muhammad smiled at something. Okay, I'm holding it up to the camera. It looks like crap. It really does. But I'm telling you that it's meant to be a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad. If there's any militant Islamicists out there, you know where to find me. Come get me. Okay. Enough false bravado for a while, because I know there's no Islamic people that listen to this thing, this show, I mean. Okay. Okay, enough of that. That's silly. I don't usually do this, but there's a TV series that I have to recommend to you, all my thousands and thousands of listeners. It's on Hulu, Hulu, and I've watched maybe 2 shows on Hulu since I signed up for it, along with my son. And this was about a year and a half ago. We were locked away due to the COVID restrictions. But anyway, it's a multi-episode show on Hulu, and I don't remember how many episodes there are, but more than 4. Okay, it's made in Australia, and the series is called First Day, as in first day of school. It's aimed at middle schoolers, and I just happened to stumble on it. I don't usually watch shows that are aimed at middle schoolers. And it features a tween trans girl. Okay, tweens are, ages 10 to 13, I guess. They've acquired the moniker tween to talk about those particular age groups of tweens. Okay, a tween trans girl named Hannah, who has just been outed at her new school, and it sets her up to be bullied over again, just like at her previous school. But at this new school, she didn't lose her friends. They embraced her and her choices that she made about how she presents herself. And they defended her against the bullies. And I won't say any more about this, but the series kind of gives me hope that through media, newspapers, magazines, television, radio, all of that, that the fact that there are members of the LGBTQ community all over the place, everywhere, they should be not singled out, of course, not bullied, but it's going to take a while in this, especially in the backwoods Republican-controlled territories of this country, where it's just no big thing anymore. Okay, this is a TV series that kind of gives me hope. One thing that I'm not going to riff on this, but I don't follow Marvel comics or any of that stuff. But the character Superman, I mean, when I was real little, I used to watch Superman on my black and white television. You know, Lois Lane, his Clark Kent's love interest, I guess. They were newspaper reporters. But anyway, cut ahead, I don't know, 50 years to now. Lois Lane and Clark Kent, I guess, you know, I haven't read these comic books, but I think they got married and then had a kid who started out being Superboy, I guess. Anyway, he is, well, he's kind of in the comic books. He's grown up now. Well, he's a older teen. Okay. Well, he's bisexual. Okay. And boy, did that get the Christian rights underwear in a knot. Excuse me, I got a sip here. Okay. One of these days I'm going to have to learn how to swallow properly. Okay, enough of that. I'm going to look for the Superman story a little bit more, and maybe next week I'll flesh it out, so to speak, for you. It's one of the many services that I do for my thousands and thousands of listeners out there. Okay, Miguel Cardona. Okay, who is he, you might ask? Okay, he's the education secretary in the Biden administration. You remember Betsy DeVos? God, we finally gotten rid of her. That was one of the good things about voting Trump out of office. She was a piece of work. But anyway, Miguel Cardona, the education secretary in the Biden administration, says, and this is a quote, students under Title IX cannot be discriminated against because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. This reverses a Trump-era policy that effectively said just the opposite. Okay, a bit of a riff here. I volunteered to be an assistant wrestling coach in 1972. This is going back quite a ways. I was working in San Francisco in retail at that time, and I was granted the privilege of taking a long lunch break. I'd have to make up for it in the second half of my shift, but I took ended up taking like 3-hour lunches to go down to Aragon High School and be the assistant wrestling coach. And I did this for about 4 years. But the first year I did it, 1972, that was when Title IX came into being. And boy, did that upset the other sports coaches down there. Their gym shorts were in a knot about that, and they were making all sorts of misogynistic jokes about women and sports and everything. And I just kept quiet. I didn't agree with them, but I wanted to be one of the guys. So, cut ahead a number of years. And one of the sports that I follow, of course, the Giants. And I sort of follow the 49ers. If I have nothing else going on in my life, which is usually, I'll watch the Niners on TV. My main team, though, are the Golden State Warriors. I love basketball, and I used to play it more or less well. And I follow the Stanford women, and I also follow the United States women's soccer team almost religiously. Anyway, okay, women's sports has flourished since Proposition 9 came into being. Okay, enough of that riffing. Okay, next topics. Governor Newsom, our very progressive Democratic governor, just signed a bill, SB 742, on Friday, the 8th of this month. That would create a buffer zone around hospitals, doctors' offices, pharmacies, and other locations offering vaccines or vaccine testing. Protesters, guess who they are? They're Republicans, conservatives, MAGA heads, Trumpers, estupidos. They would be the ones that this bill is aimed at. And it disturbs me that we sort of need to have a law like this. But it was passed, and Governor Newsom signed it. And nobody will say this in political circles, but these are the very jerks that it was aimed at. Anyway, these protesters, anti-vaxxers and blah, blah, would be prohibited from approaching or harassing anyone within 100 feet of those aforementioned places. Now, and they have to stay at least 30 feet away from people approaching these places in their cars. Okay. It also prohibits making threats or obstructing entrances. State Senator Richard Parr, P-A-R, excuse me, God, my handwriting again, Richard Pan, P-A-N, he's a Chinese physician from Sacramento that was elected to the state senate. He said the legislation is needed for the protection of patients and healthcare workers. It's a sad commentary on our country since Trump, the orange bloat bag, came on the scene in the Republican Party. It's a sad commentary that we now need a law like this. Many communities in some states have passed certain laws similar to this to keep the pro-lifers or anti-woman's choicers away from doctors' offices and women's health clinics that provide these abortion services. So they're notorious for actually, beyond just protesting abortions, they actually murder doctors. They have done that. Okay. All right. I'm not going to do a whole segment on this, but I ran across a really quick article about the Venn diagrams of MAGA heads. And Trumpers or followers of the orange bloat bag. The anti-maskers, anti-vaxxers, the anti-women's choicers, the gun enthusiasts, the ultra-religious, the anti-LGBT community. If each of these groups had a circle on this Venn diagram, they're so close to each other that they would almost just be their own circle, and there would be no need for a flowery Venn diagram. I hope you all know what a Venn diagram is. No, I'm not going to say most, but all of my listeners are very well educated, sophisticated, progressive, most of them. Another sip. All right. Another bill signed by Governor Newsom, SB 98, will protect journalists covering political protests. This law, just signed, like last week, is mainly in response to police detaining, searching, and cuffing reporters that were covering the George Floyd protests last year. Reporters could still be cited if they break any laws, except for the catch-all law of failure to disperse. Now, I'm not anti-police, as I would have to say that most far left progressives are. Unfortunately, the police have been put in an untenable position of trying to enforce laws that prohibit things that shouldn't be prohibited. And I kind of feel sorry for them. I in no way endorse the very, very misguided epithet of defund the police. I can understand the anger behind it, but as a practical matter, Republicans have just taken up this phrase and slapped it on every Democrat that they're running against. I would be more in favor of saying reform the police. One of the reforms would be to include social workers in every department, and figuring out some way for the beat policemen and the social workers to kind of become brothers in a effort to make our communities a better place to live in, and to diffuse situations that require diffusing. Police shouldn't be called to be marriage and family counselors. They shouldn't be called on to have to separate husbands and wives that just can't get along, or kids that are unduly disciplined with force, which I am not in favor of. But there just has to be a better way to police our communities. And I think that the vast majority of policemen themselves would be in agreement with that sentiment. Okay. Rational, this is a new segment. Rational Republicans are losing the civil war with the Trumpists, or the followers of the orange bloat bag sociopath. Trump's loyalists are running in state elections for secretaries of state in an attempt to control how our elections are run and how our votes are counted. I am very worried about this because voters in general don't pay much attention to the state down ballot candidates like Secretary of State. But there is a statistic that I ran across a couple of days ago. There was, I think, 15 or 16 offices of Secretary of State up for election, and in the Republican Party, and all but 2 agreed with the statement that the election of 2020 was stolen. And these Trump loyalists that are running for Secretary of State, they're going to make sure that should the orange bloat bag run again in 2024, that he will be elected come hell or high water, by hook or crook. And crooks are, in my mind, Republicans now. And I've said this before on previous shows, I am still a registered Republican. Back when, I don't know, the good old days, the pre-Ronald Reagan era, where Republicans actually were interested in governing and just had ideas somewhat opposed to classic Democrats, although I no longer follow those Republican precepts, but at least they were interested in governing. Not so anymore. They are just a Trump cult, followers of the orange bloat bag. Okay, let me get back to my written notes here. Rational Republicans are losing the GOP civil war with the bloat bag's followers. Trump loyalists are running. Okay, blah, blah. I went over that. All right. A group of disaffected Republicans, for now calling themselves rational Republicans, here, are calling for supporting moderate Democrats in 2022 and 2024. And the 2022 beginnings of the election cycle that's right around the corner. So beware, people. Vote out all Republicans. And if they say they're rational, or they say they're if they don't call themselves a Trump loyalist, don't believe them. What I would like to see is the slate wiped clean of all Republicans, and let the rational Republicans reconstitute the GOP and start from scratch and cough up some rational Republicans to run for office. Okay, you've heard of the Lincoln Project, who in the 2022 election ran these blistering ads against the orange bloat bag. And all of those people are members of this new coalition of rational Republicans. And another thing that they're calling for is a cooperation with Democrats. Now, they are by no means progressive in the sense that we have progressive Democrats. They are willing to work with and help out Democrats of the middle of the road to conservative edge of things, Democrats. But anyway, they're willing to forsake Trump loyalists who call themselves Republicans. I hope that they would just call themselves Trump loyalists and be done with it. They can't be ashamed of being a Trump loyalist. If you're not ashamed of it, then say you are. At least be honest. But no, they're Republicans. They're not honest. Okay, this group, the Responsible Republicans, will continue to raise funds to combat radical Trump loyalists. An example, now this guy was a Republican. He's an independent now. He just can't bring it upon himself to join the Democratic Party. Okay, that's cool. Evan McMullin. He ran in the 2020 election as an independent. He was a Republican, and he's from Utah. He's an ex-CIA person and has a military background. I would be comfortable voting for him. I don't know yet who his Democratic opponent's going to be, but the orange bloat bag loyalist is Mike Lee, Senator Mike Lee. So Evan McMullin is running in the Republican primary to primary out Mike Lee. If McMullin wins the Republican nomination, which I don't know, Trump is obviously going to go to Utah and stump for Mike Lee. So I hope McMullin gets the nomination, however doubtful it may be. Okay, Mike Lee, Senator Mike Lee is he's all in with Donald Trump, and he's definitely a MAGA head senator. Another sip coming up. Okay. Environmental good news. All right. The Biden administration announced that 32 countries have joined the United States in pledging to reduce methane emissions. Methane, which is a chemical formula of CH4. There's a one carbon atom connected to 4 hydrogen atoms. That's methane. It currently accounts for about 20% of man-made global greenhouse gases. CO2 is the main greenhouse gas, and the thing about CO2 is it lingers in the atmosphere for hundreds of years once it's in there. Methane kind of drops out of the atmosphere relatively soon, 4 or 5 years, which is still a long time, but it's up there, and it's causing global warming just like CO2 does. Methane is the main constituent of natural gas, and in our Northern California part of the state, Pacific Gas and Electric, that's PG&E. The gas part of it is natural gas. They supply us. I have a natural gas pipe running into our house. The only thing that we use it for is the water heater. That has a little flame that's kind of constantly going. And the clothes dryer. Those are the only things we use natural gas for. But the city of Berkeley is the only one in California I can think of offhand, but they've passed a city ordinance banning the use of gas intake pipes into new buildings. They're trying to electrify everything. And, of course, the fossil fuel industry is all up in arms about this. Another source of methane, and a lot of people make a joke about this, but cow farts and cow burps and pig farts and pig burps. Agriculture is the number one producer of methane, actually, followed closely by natural gas. The 32 countries who came with us to pledge to cut back natural gas do not include China, India, Russia, and Brazil. None of those people joined this pledge. Okay, now coming up on Halloween, October 31st, is the United Nations Climate Conference in Glasgow, Scotland. So I will keep you up to date on what's going on with that. Okay. China, India, Russia, and Brazil are the four biggest emitters of methane. And methane, an awful lot of it comes out of the ground from oil wells. I mean, some wells are sunk in the ground specifically to tap natural gas. But in oil wells, your run-of-the-mill oil wells, there's plenty of natural gas mixed in and trapped along with the oil that escapes when oil wells are drilled. Another statistic that just blew my mind, there are more than 1 million oil wells in the United States that have been abandoned. It was just too expensive to get more oil out of them. And only about 1/3 of them have been capped properly. The others are just the natural gas and light oil seepage just comes up to the top and ruins our environment. I mean, talk about green jobs, the potential for green jobs. We ought to have something akin to the Civilian Conservation Corps and train these people to go out and cap all these wells. The oil drilling companies that have lost track of them should be fined for each well they can't tell us exactly where they are, and pay for the capping of the wells. Another sip. Okay. Eat less meat. Okay, that's another way to eventually cut down on the amount of methane that's farted out into the atmosphere. Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods are hoping to replicate their success in plant-based beef with plant-based chicken nuggets. Okay. This month, October of 2021, is the rollout at Walmart, Kroger, and Albertsons. This article I read listed other markets, but these are the biggies. But this time there is already 50 brands of plant-based chicken tenders. Morningstar Farms is the most well-known brand and has been making chicken pieces, nuggets, tenders, whatever, for decades. They've been doing it. But Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods are the two big plant-based companies that are making them now, and they kind of have a name behind themselves. So watch out very, very soon for laboratory-grown beef and chicken and fish. I did a show, this tiny segment on one of my shows about 5 weeks ago about lab-grown fish. You take cells from, real fish and put it into the laboratory and I guess a rather large petri dish, and these fish cells replicate with the proper tending, and eventually they grow into a big chunk of fish. Okay. I don't remember the exact process. That show I did on it, I went into more detail, but it's available, or it's going to be available very soon. Lab-grown beef and chicken and fish to come soon. Singapore, that city-state at the end of the Malay Peninsula, that very prosperous city, has okayed, I guess they have their own health department and labs there. They've okayed laboratory grown chicken nuggets already. Well, I got to figure that they know what they're doing there, and if they say it's okay, then it should be okay for us. We are not the end all and be all of technology anymore. Okay, the last segment here, getting the carbon dioxide out of the air. Okay, mantle rock. Now, the layers of the earth, the crust is the outer part of it. Right beneath the crust is called the mantle, M-A-N-T-L-E. And the rock in the mantle that's more near the upper surface is periodotite. No, peridotite. God. I Googled the pronunciation of this and then I blew it, of course. Peridotite. Okay. And water seeps down into the cracks in peridotite. And water, whether it's seawater or lake water or wherever, a lot of oxygen and CO2 dissolves into water of any kind. And the CO2 in the water that seeps down in there combines with the magnesium in this peridotite to make magnesium carbonate. And I'm not going to give you I don't know the chemical formula of this, but it traps CO2 down in the rock. And you can see the carbonate streaks within peridotite rock. And normally we can't see mantle rock because that's way down there. But there are certain places on the earth where through crustal convulsions and movement of the mantle, where it's pushed up through the crust of the earth and it's exposed there. Okay. Now, certain geologists, and this one guy in particular, Peter Kellerman of Columbia University, he's a geologist, and he has a PhD, or he's a postdoc, and he knows his rock chemistry. Okay, he found this place in the nation of Oman, O-M-A-N. The capital of it is Muscat. It's right on the lower part of the Arabian Peninsula. Anyway, in this outcropping, a rather large outcropping of peridotite in places in Oman are estimated to be absorbing CO2 and petrifying 100,000 metric tons of CO2 annually. Now, and that may seem like a lot to you, and it is, but compared with the 43 billion, with a B, tons emitted annually by all our, cars and factories and cement plants and farming practices and forest fires. Okay. 43 billion tons emitted of CO2 annually, which contributes to global warming. The 100,000 metric tons that's trapped annually down in this rock with natural processes, it's just a drop in the bucket. Okay, well, this geologist seems to think that this natural, rather slow process could be enhanced with a little engineering. Boy, does that raise a red flag in my mind, but he knows what he's talking about. I know what I'm talking about a little bit, not like this guy. But anyway, there, let's see, with the, okay, I lost my notes again. Okay, this natural, rather slow process could be enhanced with a little engineering. You could end up with 1 billion tons of CO2 per cubic kilometer of rock, this peridotite, per year. There's about 15,000 cubic kilometers of the peridotite rock just in Oman, just in this one area that he was exploring. The way to speed up the process, according to him, is by drilling down a few kilometers to hotter rock and pumping down seawater, which is saturated with oxygen and CO2. The CO2 would be taken out of the air. Now, how do you do that? Time check. Okay. A Canadian startup company already has the machinery to take CO2 out of the air, and the country of Iceland already does this. Outcroppings of peridotite are also found in Alaska, New Zealand, Japan, and California. We must place a carbon tax on emitters to get this CO2 sequestration process going. Because it's not free. You have to pay for the machinery and the labor that it entails. I mean, all this stuff costs money, but we're going to have to do it. Okay, play out music. You have been listening to The Midnight Skeptic on KPCA LP. Petaluma, California, and we're at 103.3 on the FM dial and worldwide at www.kpca.fm. Support community radio at patreon.com/Petaluma Community Access. And remember, think critically, think logically, but live joyously, and most importantly, pet your cats. Jeez, you know what? My clock on my screen says 57 minutes and 51 seconds. I made it below the 58-minute mark where KPCA LP 103.3 cuts me off. Okay. To all the YouTube people out there, we'll see you next week. So think logically, think rationally, think compassionately, and pet your cats.